Tonight, I see coming in some folks from the district. Wonderful. Mr. Solomon, welcome. Lovely to have you here. We see you.
Hello.
Very wonderful. There is Kimberlyn Carter arriving. Welcome, welcome. Lovely to have you here. We are so grateful.
I am happy. I'm happy to be here. I am also in transit. I took the liberty of inviting Reverend James Baker, who does a lot of faith outreach strategy across the state. And because he knows a lot of the pastors and churches in some of those rural areas, I thought he would be a good addition to the conversation to help the effort, if that's okay.
Fantastic. Kimberlyn, thank you so much. If either you or he would just float it in the waiting room when it's an appropriate time for him to chime in, we would love to have him on board. Kimberlyn, thank you.
Absolutely.
There are lots of people here who are forces in our community. And it is magnificent to see all these extraordinary folks. Thank you so much for being here. Very nice. I am hearing let's see, I think we might have somebody who might have some background sound. Well, we'll see. Anyway, lovely to have you all here. We're going to give folks another minute or two to arrive. We are so grateful to have had such a wonderful response. And this feels like an extraordinary day to be having this event. Going to give folks another minute before we get started. This is a wonderful showing. Thank you all for being here. It's thrilling. Very wonderful. Okay, I think let's give it just a little bit longer. Wonderful. Okay, I think that we are going to go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and welcome you. I am so grateful to have you all here. My name is Becky Butler. I am one of the coordinators of Necessary Trouble Indivisible, and I want to extend a welcome not just on our behalf, but also on the behalf of all our other co-hosts. The county Democratic committees from Fayette, from Pike, from Spalding, and from Upson. We are so happy to be in this with them. A couple of short words about Zoom protocol. We are going to be recording this. We've had a few requests for that, and so we'll be able to expand the impact of it after tonight. We're going to ask you to keep yourselves muted, but we're really going to encourage you to enter any questions or comments you have in the chat. We will try to follow along, and we'll try to circle back for any questions that folks have. And I want to just say a little bit about the trajectory tonight. We are going to be hearing some pre-recorded greetings from Dr. Naomi King. We will be hearing from District Attorney Deborah Gonzalez. We will be hearing a course from Reverend Wimbish. We will be doing questions and answers, and any questions we will get to after Reverend Wimbish speaks. And then we have a special gift and offering at the end. I want to just say what an honor it is to be here tonight. It is an honor to be working with this team. It is an honor to be having this event on this most special of days. It is an honor to be having this event on this extraordinary week. And I am so also very grateful for our moderator for tonight. Dr. Tracey Fisher will be moderating, and Dr. Fisher, let me say a little bit of her extraordinary list of background and credentials. Dr. Fisher has a background in broadcast news reporting and public relations. She has 3 postgraduate degrees, including a doctorate, which involved a dissertation on generational racism, conscious and unconscious bias, systemic inequity, and earned and unearned privilege. She's the president of the Gwinnett Democratic Women, and she is one of the extraordinary forces behind the shift that we have seen in Gwinnett County over the last few years. So our gratitude goes out to her, and we are also very fortunate to count her among the members of Necessary Trouble. And Dr. Fisher, thank you for doing this, and I am going to turn this over to you.
Thank you for that wonderful greeting, Becky. I really appreciate it greatly. Thank you and good evening, Necessary Trouble Indivisible and County Democratic Party committees, Fayette, Pike, Spalding, and Upson. I am Dr. Tracey Fisher, and it is my pleasure to moderate this event this evening. A few words first about Dr. King and the connection to this great day of service to this event are things that I'd like to read to you, to share with you. In April 1963, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested and jailed with many others in the SCLC for taking part in nonviolent demonstrations in Birmingham, Alabama to end segregation. Peaceful protesters defied an injunction by vocal pro segregationist and, ironically, Commissioner of Public Safety Eugene Bull Connor. On April 12th, before the mass arrests, 8 white, very prominent religious leaders wrote an open letter to the local news media denouncing the protests as unwise and untimely. Dr. King's response, letter from a Birmingham jail, excoriated that position by powerfully conveying, quote, justice delayed is justice denied. 58 years later, in 2021, justice delayed continues to be justice denied in America's criminal justice system. It teems with people, data, and evidence of mass incarceration operating just like an era most of us thought had long gone by. So, what to do? We must dig deep and work for change that helps to elect representatives who will work for reform. Justice delayed is justice denied. Change must come in the morning. So it is my great pleasure that I introduce a pre-recorded video by Dr. Naomi Ruth Barber King. But first, I'm going to give you some background on Dr. Naomi Ruth Barber King. Dr. Naomi Barber King is the widow of A.D. King, the younger brother of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She and A.D. were deeply involved in the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, involved also in the bus boycotts and with the creation of SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the sit-ins, and the campaign to vote in Selma, Alabama. In 1963, their family home was bombed. And in 1969, a year after the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., AD was also murdered. Despite all of these trials, Naomi has moved through the world with dignity, grace, and generosity. In 2008, she established the A.D. King Foundation, which focused on youth and women's empowerment and nonviolent social change. Now in her 90s, she continues to be a very bright light in the communities that she serves. And here is the video.
Go ahead.
This is Mrs. Naomi Ruth Barber King bringing you greetings. Happy New Year, everybody. Keep on fighting the good fight. Keep God first in everything Everything else will be added unto you. Love you.
Such a beautiful and inspiring video clip. We appreciate beyond words Dr. Naomi Ruth Barber King. I would give that a hand, I think. I think you should do that. For our first speaker, I have the pleasure of introducing District Attorney Deborah Gonzalez. District Attorney Gonzalez is a former State House representative who was recently elected District Attorney of Athens, Clarke, Oconee counties. She is the very first Latina District Attorney in Georgia, and also the very first Puerto Rican DA in the country. She is the most progressive DA in Georgia. On day one of her term, she announced 40 policy reforms effective immediately. The reason Reverend Wimbish's race is on the ballot is because Deborah Gonzalez went to court and won 5 times against Governor Kemp, arguing against a law that would have allowed his appointees to remain in office for 2 years before facing voters. Please welcome District Attorney Deborah Gonzalez. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Fisher, for your introduction. I do want to just say one thing. I am the first female Puerto Rican DA in the country. We actually have a male Puerto Rican, and just by happenstance, his name happens to be Eric Gonzalez. No relation at all. It just shows you, I guess, just how popular the last name of Gonzalez is on the island, huh? But good evening. Boy, it's always such a delight for me to come and be with the necessary troublers, and so every time you guys send an invitation, I'm going to be here. But today is MLK Day, and there's a couple of things that came to mind. First of all, many of you have probably seen Dr. Bernice King's tweet today and Facebook post where she talks about how her father was actually one of the most hated men during his lifetime. And I bring that up to show just how important every single person in this fight for justice is, and that many times they're not appreciated at the moment in which they step forward, right? And there's so much when it comes to MLK and what he stood for. And we see all these quotes on this one day that come out, right? And I saw another meme on Facebook that said, for the other 364 days, may you live the quote that you put on your Facebook today. And I think that's something for all of us to keep in mind. The quote from MLK that I'd like to share with you is very simply this: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And most of the time, that will be the end of the quote that you hear, but I want to continue it. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Dr. Fisher mentioned that we are here because of a lawsuit that I won against Governor Kemp. A lawsuit that came about because of a law that was actually passed the year I was in the General Assembly. A law and a bill that I had voted against, knowing the danger that it could have on our democracy, knowing that it could turn a moment where people would not be electing their own elected officials. Well, thanks to so much support from people right here in the Necessary Troublers, and I want to give a shout out to Robin Joy Shar, we were able to go and fight the good fight against that law and against people who wanted to take those rights away from the community. And, as hard as it was I can't regret a single moment of this long journey. And not just for me, but we knew from the very beginning that it would have many more effects than just on my race. And here we see Reverend Wimbish. And although I haven't met him before tonight, I can tell you in reading his platform, in just knowing what he stands for, I am so proud and honored to be here tonight to introduce to all of you another champion for criminal justice reform. Because it doesn't take one, it doesn't take two. And I'm reminded every day of what Ruth Bader Ginsburg answered when they asked her, how many women are enough on the Supreme Court? And she said 9. How many minority DAs are enough in Georgia? 49 of them. And I will paraphrase her. Why? Because each of us bring that important perspective of what really represents our community and our state and our country. And do not forget that what happens right here in Georgia has such ramifications across the entire country. We've seen that. We've turned the Senate by what we've done. And now we have a chance to continue to make our criminal legal system a true criminal justice system. You started with me, and I am so grateful. And I am starting the work as I promised to do, as well as be transparent. So you can always follow me every week. I do a weekly recap of what's happened in that week, because the one thing that I do not want to see again is that when I'm up for reelection, or when Reverend Wimbish is out there on the campaign trail, that nobody has to ask, what does a DA do? Why are they so important? Right? People should know. That is one of my objectives. People should know. And so I am so thrilled to be here tonight on MLK Day. You know, we've had a full day of events and services and parades. And now today we get to top it off with this, with welcoming another champion, someone who's been here for years. He didn't just show up out of nowhere. He's been doing this work for decades. And now he's been called to do it in a different role, in a role where he can have such an impact. It's so important. And so I look forward on February 9th, after that election, of welcoming him as a colleague in this work of justice from the prosecution's seat. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Support him the way that you've supported me, with your money, with your, talking to people with postcards. Man, Reverend Wimbish, they can write postcards, okay? You guys were awesome. But every single one of those postcards was a vote. Every single one of those postcards made a difference in our system. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I welcome Reverend Wimbish to this new way of fighting for criminal justice. Thank you.
We are so grateful for your persistence, District Attorney Gonzalez, and for your presentation. Thank you so much for being here. And please stay with us. And now we have a word from Rosea Shepard, the Necessary Troubler member extraordinaire, who you all know.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. I'm moved by all that I've heard tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. Spalding, Fayette, Upson, and Pike. These are the 4 counties in the heart of Georgia, which make up the Griffin Judicial District, the circuit. It's easy to understand why folks who live in those counties would go to the chat box, click on the link, and donate time and money. But as for me, I live in DeKalb County. So why am I giving tonight? It's the same reason that you should, because justice denied anywhere is justice denied everywhere. The killing of Breonna Taylor and subsequent dropping of charges by the prosecutor, that educated some folks to something those of us familiar with so-called justice already knew. The position of the DA matters. And wow, do we have a champion for justice to cheer on here tonight. He's a veteran of the fight for civil rights. He's a distinguished attorney, a community advocate, and has been a judge in his own right. If you visited his website, you know that Reverend Wimbish has a plan for the DA's office. It will ensure justice is done in a fair and impartial manner in the Griffin Judicial District. Justice. How long? Not long. If you go to that chat, click the links and give. Your donation will help us match the $2,500 challenge that's on the table tonight. You'll double its impact. Even your smallest contribution will help this campaign get the win. $35 will cover postage to send 100 of those postcards we've been talking about tonight to reach voters in this time of COVID-19. You are the difference, and we thank you. Back to you, Dr. Fisher.
Thank you so much, Rosea. That was a wonderful outreach for donations, and please contribute. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is our star guest, Reverend Dexter Wimbish, who is running for district attorney in the Griffin Judicial Circuit. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Reverend Wimbish, if you don't mind, sir. I have your bio here. I'd like to go through it and let people know about you. Reverend Wimbish has spent 25 years as an attorney, municipal court judge, adjunct professor, civil rights advocate, and minister. He grew up in Greensboro, Georgia, the great-grandchild of sharecroppers. He was the first person in his family to graduate from college. After law school, he became deputy director at the Center for Democratic Renewal, coordinating a national response to a rash of arsons that decimated Black houses of worship across the South. In 2004, he became general counsel of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the organization founded by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In that capacity, he traveled the country, working to ensure that every American would be treated with dignity and respect while fighting against overt and covert racism. In 2014, he became the first African-American municipal court judge in Greensboro. Important note, the last Democrat to run for DA in this judicial district was 21 years ago. And that person was a Dixiecrat who became a Republican in 2004. Thus, Reverend Wimbish's candidacy is groundbreaking. Please welcome Reverend Dexter Wimbish.
Thanks, everyone. Let me start by saying the support is just simply overwhelming. First, giving honor to God. Second, saying thank you to Necessary Trouble, the Democratic committees of Fayette County, Spalding County, Pike, and Upson. I was going to give you a little background in terms of my history, where I came from. But I'm going to do a little switch here. A month ago, I had just been discharged from the hospital after I fought cancer for the second time. 11 years ago, I beat colon cancer, stage 4 colon cancer, against all odds. Last year, I found out that I had prostate cancer and had 4 surgeries over the past year. And so actually in between one of those surgeries, I ended up helping the Spalding County Board of Elections. That became part of a controversy around the election process. And so I found myself just 2 weeks removed from prostate cancer, faced with the notion of answering the calling to run for district attorney. After some 27 years of being on the other side of the aisle, representing probably 1,000 defendants in the last 27 years, seeing a system that treats individuals as if everyone is criminals, knowing that the vast majority of individuals who end up in our courtrooms are people who make mistakes, people who have substance abuse problems, people who have mental health issues. But for 27 years, watching a system target those individuals, place them in jail, and oftentimes throwing away the key. And so when I was asked if I would run for DA, I prayed about it. And the message came back loud and clear, run. At the time, I had no idea that there had not been a Democratic candidate in this district. But I was having a conversation with a minister friend of mine, and he said, Dexter, you know, I didn't even realize that we could vote for the position of district attorney. And what that told me was that in this area, the office of district attorney has been fraught with nepotism. And not necessarily nepotism from a familial standpoint, but from a systematic standpoint. What we have in this system, in this district, are individuals who hold on to power and who make decisions concerning our young people and our family members on a daily basis, not grounded in evidence, but oftentimes grounded in racism, grounded in other preconceived notions as it relates to race, as it relates to poverty, as it relates to class. And I said, you got to get involved, because after 27 years of representing individuals who oftentimes had very little evidence, but prosecutors would bring charges against them, that some would sit in jail for 6 months, and by the time they were able to go before a judge preparing for their trial, they would find themselves pleading out because they didn't want to take the risk of going to trial and losing. That's why we have to have a reform agenda. You talk about Breonna Taylor, you talk about Ahmaud Arbery, you talk about the ability for a DA to look at a set of circumstances and decide to bring charges or not bring charges. That's an awful lot of power, especially when given to people who don't understand that this country belongs to all of us. For 27 years, I've been on the other side. 27 years, I've been fighting against policies that were already in place. In essence, fighting an uphill battle. And this gives me the opportunity to go to the other side and force reform. And I use the word force because it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to turn people around and have them understand that we all deserve decency. When the DA decides to prosecute a case, they're not just prosecuting that person. They're prosecuting the family. For 27 years, I've listened to families. I've listened to defendants. Just a few short months ago, I defended a young man who was a junior in high school. And the state brought 2 charges of rape against him. Very, very, very little evidence. He had an attorney that tried to plead the case out, and within 10 days of being hired, but his mother said something's just not right. And when I got involved and I talked to the DA, I was able to show them, you don't have any evidence here. I'm proud to say that 6 months later, both of those charges were dead docketed. That young man now will go on to attend college at Albany State in the spring. The power of the DA is enormous. The power to charge, the power not to charge, but also the power to institute alternative methods of dealing with criminal behavior. Since I became the municipal court judge in Greensboro, now 85% of our cases are resolved by pretrial services. What we do is, for instance, when Georgia had an issue with proving the case, marijuana cases, marijuana possession cases, we didn't wait for the Supreme Court to make a decision. We made a decision not to prosecute those cases to trial. We instituted a pretrial diversion program where individuals are able to go online, complete a drug and alcohol course, and then plead to a conditional discharge. What that means is, for us, over 100 young people were able to avoid having a record for drug possession. That's huge. One of my issues is eliminating the school to prison pipeline. In the last 3 years, I've been aggressively involved with that issue here in Spalding County, where we now have SROs, police officers in the school, who are supposed to be there to protect, but more often than not, they're being used to discipline our children. That's wrong. Kids who 25 years ago would have simply been suspended from school now find themselves being arrested and prosecuted. I currently represent 2 young people now who are facing felony charges because the district attorney has decided to bring charges against them because of an altercation they had with SROs in the school. And that's why we need reform. We also need to go back and reconnect with the community. The DA's office has to become part of the community. Now, we must prosecute violent crime. And I'm not soft on crime. Never have been, never will be. I sat as a judge. But what I understand is that the people who enter our court system, who are not criminals, they're just people who made mistakes. They shouldn't be treated the same way that violent offenders are treated. They should be given the opportunity to make up for the mistake, repay their debt to society, and move on. But one of the biggest issues we have, especially in the African-American community, is that we have DAs who engage in prosecuting individuals for cases that really could be resolved without going to court, without having a trial, without having charges follow them for the next 25 years of their life. And finally, as DA, I want to bring in ministers, community organizations that can provide resources for defendants. One of the reasons we have so much recidivism in the criminal justice system is that people don't have access to jobs. That's why many people commit crimes. People don't have access to mental health. People don't have access to drug and alcohol programs. So I would use our accountability courts in a much more substantial way so that we can address those issues. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. I am just overwhelmed. And as your next DA, I promise to make sure that we change the way we do business. My slogan is compassion, common sense, and civility. We have to bring those 3 things back to our community. Thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions that you might have now.
Reverend Wimbish, that was wonderful. Really, really, it was. And we've got questions for you. We're not letting you go away. we have some questions for you. The first one that I see is that we need more information or more elaboration, if you can give it to us, on why reform isn't easy. It seems like it would be not that difficult. If you have people in mind, as you said, compassion, common sense, and civility. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, I think one of the issues we have with true reform is that people are scared. People have been in positions of power for so long, and they're so accustomed to doing things a certain way. When you talk about change, they shy away from it. And what you will have is, you know, I do a lot of work in rural areas, and oftentimes what I see is you you have a system where everybody's working together hand in hand. It's a good old boy network, whether it's the judges, whether it's the prosecutors, and in some cases, whether it's the public defenders or the private attorneys. We got to break that cycle. People have gotten so accustomed to doing things the way they think they should be done that they're scared to look at the possibility that the way we've been doing it is wrong. People get comfortable. And I think that's why there's so much resistance to reform. People are scared of losing their power. And especially in a community like the Griffin Circuit, a rural community. It's so much so different practicing in rural areas than it is in metropolitan community. It is a different animal, totally. And so reform comes slow, but it can be had.
Well, I have another question also. When you said that they are convicting families, not just defendants, this individual has asked or stated, will your lack of background as a prosecutor hamper your work as a district attorney?
I don't think it's hampered at all. I think coming from 27 years of being a private defense attorney, for being a judge, I see it. I understand how the system works. There's a tremendous amount of training that goes into being a district attorney. They don't just throw you in there and you start being a DA. You get trained. I think I'm more than capable to learn how it works. But at the same time, I think my lack of experience as a prosecutor, it helps me. It helps me understand what's truly going on. This is not just about somebody having a high conviction record, which is often the time what you see in institutions where there's not reform. It's all about getting the conviction. And so what happens is cases that shouldn't be brought get brought. And I think looking at it from a different perspective, we can, as DA, I can begin to eliminate a lot of cases that shouldn't be brought to trial, shouldn't be charged, and focus on the more heinous crimes, whether it's gang violence, whether it's violence against women, whether it's uh, assault, battery, robberies, home invasions. That's where our resources should be going. It should be going to getting the hardcore criminals off the streets. But at the same time, we have to understand, we got to have compassion. There's a reason why people commit crimes. It's rooted in the inability, oftentimes, to take care of their families. That's where it comes from. And so we got to find a way to bring the community together. We're too divided right now. And I think the lack of experience as a prosecutor actually helps in this case. It's not going to be difficult to prosecute those hard crimes. I think prosecutors give themselves too much credit oftentimes when they say they prosecuted, violent crimes. People understand that. What people don't understand is, why do people get lost? Why do people end up sitting in jail for 6 months to a year? Why? Why? What happens? How do those people get lost? How do people with mental health issues get lost in the system? Those are the issues that have to be addressed.
So this goes into the final question that we have for you this evening about the school to prison pipeline. And we hear you talking about things that don't necessarily require changes in law, correct?
Correct. Correct. We've seen this school to prison pipeline now for about 25 years. I think if you look at it, it's no coincidence that the increased number of arrests in schools correlates with the increased number of private prisons in this country. It's as simple as that. People have to understand that when we build these private prisons, we got to fill them up. And there's only a finite number of criminals, so we're creating new criminals. And so one of the things that we can do is we can inform SROs not to get involved in disciplinary matters. That's one of the things that you don't have to have a lot of change. And a lot of systems are actually moving away from having SROs in the school systems. And one of the things I would look at is we would do a study to see whether or not that might be advantageous. Also, I'm big on mentoring. I'm working on my PhD and I hope to finish up this spring in its own formal mentoring programs. And I think mentoring is a key for helping young people in our community. Matching them up with professionals who can bring them along, give them encouragement, and show them the type of life that they can have. And coming from the DA's office, I think that could be a powerful statement as opposed to putting somebody in jail, linking them up with a mentor who could, give them hope. And so that's one of the ways we could deal with that issue without actually having to change the law.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Wimbish. Your replies and information and knowledge sharing are so terrific. And we learned a lot. I think all of us learned a lot this evening. Yes. Again, we're going to applaud. Yes.
Thank you.
And donations, as Rosea said, we got to do that too. And we thank you so much and hope that you stay for the rest of this program. And we thank you. Our next guest is Elbert Solomon, second vice president of the Spalding County Democratic Committee. Is Mr. Solomon here?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Fisher. In preparing for this fundraiser tonight, I'm a numbers guy. My background, I'm a chemical engineer, so I wanted to know if we could win this race. So I went back and made a comparison of the general election voting in all 4 of the counties. And I did a little summary sheet here that you can see. This is the November 3rd election, and this represents the current president-elect that will be president in a day or so. And this is the 45th president. These are the voting numbers for the county. And you see there was a total difference between those numbers. In November was 23,195 votes. And if you move down to the runoff election and using Warnock and Leffler, you see the difference in voting is only 2,041 votes. So you see that Reverend Wimbish can win this election. And we know that turnout, runoff elections, you get a 20% drop or more. And you can see I did the drop, but look what happened on the Democratic side. We increased 12% and the Republican side decreased 20%. So our goal is that they continue to decrease and that we continue to increase, but we've got lots of work to do. Over the weekend, and you can take it down now. Over the weekend, I did some calling, actually trying to find people that could not go to the poll, that was bedridden in my community or had some illness or something. And they were not aware of this election. So our goal over the next 3 weeks is to get a great awareness program going. And in order to do that, we will need some funding. As we discussed in our last meeting, we want to print 10,000 newspapers and distribute 2,500 in each of the 4 counties. That paper will be available on the 28th, and that costs $2,000. We need awareness flyers with bold messages like "Save Our Black Boys," "Elect Dexter Wimbish," and we need to get that out on social media. But what we do on these half pagers is we go in and we give businesses a small stipend, and for them to put them in their customers' bags when they come to buy whatever products that they buy at the different restaurants or the small stores and so forth. So we need a couple of $1,000s for 40,000 awareness flyers. And of course, we need a couple of $1,000s for business stipends. You have to give them some type of incentives to do the work. And this is really good now in this COVID environment, is to let them do the work for us. And this happens deep into these neighborhoods where eligible voters are not voting. This will require some food. You have to provide some food at pop-up events and different events that you are having around the neighborhood. And also, we would need banners when we do canvassing. Canvassing is a very safe way, and it's an exciting way to get voters' attention. As I shared with some last week, is when we go in and do a canvass, we stop, we play music, we get out and dance, and we do flag waving and all of that, and it get people excited about it. And we will ask them, if it's early voting, would they like to join us and move on to the poll? And we've had that to happen in some instances where people would line up and follow us to the poll. So we'll need about $500 to buy some banners and so forth. But I think right now what we need is we need people to donate and to give to finance. Campaigning and doing a good campaign is expensive. We raised over $111,000 in the Spalding campaign that we did before. So we've gotten a lot of goodwill. We've invested that money in the community, and hopefully that we will build on that. But Spalding has really got to come up with those other 2,000 votes. And that's going to be in our game plan. We're going to show them the data. Here we need 2,000 additional votes. And that's what we're going to be working on our campaign. We need your support in order to get these things done. And we need it now. We need the money tomorrow. We need to hit the road tomorrow. I'm going to make another donation. When Dexter announced that he was going to run, he called me up, and I immediately went online, and he would tell you, and made a donation. And I'm making another donation tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Thank you so much for the extraordinary work you're doing. Thank you for also for making that wonderful pitch. We figured that between Rosea Shepherd and Elbert Solomon, we would have people going to their pocketbooks. So our great gratitude to both of you. I also wanted to extend an extraordinary gratitude to Dr. Fisher, who had to go to another event, but we were so happy to have her navigate this evening up until now. And I wanted to just, I wanted to say a couple of things before we go into our final closing. I wanted to just acknowledge two different sets of things. And one is how hard people have worked and how much they have donated in these past elections. And I know that everybody has worked their hearts out, and I know that everyone is tired and spent, and we did really, really, really well, and we did what we set out to do. And I also want to acknowledge that for those of us, particularly who live in Georgia, we know that the work is not done. we know that with all the work that was done in Georgia, not only did we flip the Senate and flip Georgia for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but we also moved the needle. We moved Georgia, we shifted Georgia away from its Confederate past, and we shifted it in the direction of a more perfect union. And that work is not finished. And that work, those of us in Georgia also know, that work happens, the next chapter of that work happens at the intersection of criminal justice reform and rural Georgia. And that's where our work lies. And this election sits at that intersection. So even though folks are tired and even though folks are spent, I am asking and hoping that you will jump in here with us. And I want to give huge shout outs to all the people who have put in the chat how much they have donated. It is a balm and a gift and a tremendous encouragement. I also wanted to say just one thing about why we are doing this on this day, on this most meaningful of days. The work that Dr. King illuminated and led and inspired is today one of the places that work is being fought is in criminal justice reform. It's the work that was started in the civil rights movement of the 50s and the 60s. It continues in election integrity, but also it very much continues in criminal justice reform. And that link is embodied by Reverend Wimbish. He began as a civil rights advocate. He was general counsel for the SCLC, founded by Martin Luther King. He fought racism through the Center for Democratic Progress. He was the first African-American appointed judge in Greensboro. And even his candidacy, there's never been an African-American candidate in this district race. And so his very candidacy is groundbreaking. So we do this on this day, recognizing the sobriety and the meaningfulness of this day, the mightiness and the tenderness of this day. And we ask you to join us. So thank you very much for being here. There is one final gift we want to offer you. And that is a gift that was put together by Renee Robertson, who is a friend and a supporter of Reverend Wimbish. She is an extraordinary advocate, an activist, an actress, and as you will hear in a moment, an amazing singer. She sings the following song. She put together the compilation. She did it as a tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King and also as a gift to Reverend Wimbish in his candidacy. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen for this final gift, and a reminder that people will still be able to hear it if you are clicking the donate link as you do. Here we go.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the glistening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the glistening skies. Let it resound as the road meets sing a song full of faith that the dark has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the presence has brought us. Facing the rising sun of the new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the roads we trod, bitter the chasing rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with the steady beat and as our weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. We have come over the way that the tears have been watered. We have come treading the path of the blood of the slaughtered. Out of the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast far along the way. Thou who hast bright thy might, let us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places of God where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
Kay Renee Robertson, thank you so much. She reminds me also to let people know that her relationship with Reverend Wimbish goes back to the 20 years they spent together, working together at SCLC. She refers to him as her big brother. This is an honor to be here tonight. If everybody would just unmute yourself and please give a huge appreciation to all those who are doing this important continuation of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s work. It is an extraordinary work that all of them are doing, and they are leading us together into the beloved community. Please unmute yourself and let's give them a huge shout out.
Woo! Yes. Bravo.
Bravo. Thank you all so very much for being here. We are so grateful. Thank you for supporting this work. Thank you for supporting this wonderful candidate. And here we go. Good night and thank you.